Thank you, Siegfried, Sharma, Felix Zottel, and the TUtheTop Alumni Club for organizing this event. I will be speaking today about the economic trends prior, during, and past COVID-19. So in the decade before COVID-19, we saw a slowing of general globalization hallmarks such as trade in goods and services, foreign direct investments, but also cross-border bank loans was going down, capital flows, and S&P 500 sales abroad was kind of stagnant. We saw this globalization trend, a reshoring of global value chains, production became closer to the consumers, and first shadows of globalization in the contagion risk that became apparent in the 2008-9 world financial crisis. We also were speaking for the very first time in 2013 about what is globalization for public health, and us traveling around the globe in the Emergent Risk Initiative at Princeton University. Politics started to become focused on the homeland, and within the EU, exit talks dominated the last decade. There was the highest gap between skilled and unskilled labor, and with this the share of countries catching up in international development steadily declined. Where globalization was still going on was digitalization. When you see here that data transfer still grew exponentially around the globe prior to COVID. The corona outbreak now really exacerbated this trend. Globalization skyrocketed, and online workforces became really global, and flexibility was enabled due to cut red tape. Tech innovations in the healthcare sector comprised of healthcare apps, telemedicine, for instance, came recently to Austria, and Bluetooth tracking of not only touch points of human beings, but also the Bluetooth tracking of medical devices that helped in bottleneck problems, in fraud prevention. If you consider that you only have a Bluetooth key that can enable medical devices and medication, but also in having a cartography of where medical devices are needed. International differences became really apparent in digitalization during the COVID-19 crisis. Asia and the post-Soviet countries were censoring first online whistleblowers, mobile crowd control, and monitoring compliance was best in these parts of the world. In the US, market leaders started partnering on pooling health data as never before, and there was an information overload, sometimes in a freedom of speech territory. The EU focused on privacy protection within sharing big data and harvesting of network effects became apparent in the pooling of healthcare data. So information is a good that is non-rivalrous. I can put information online, and I do not take anything away from reading information, collecting information from, I am not hindering other people to enjoy these benefits. And the more information I gather, the more network effects I can benefit from, because I can make complex conclusions out of the more information I get. In a post-COVID-19 world, I do believe that future global healthcare will rely heavily on artificial intelligence, big data, and robotics. As you can see in the graph below, anti-corruption correlates positively specifically with internet connectivity. So we can say that artificial intelligence comes out of areas in the world that are less corrupt, and these areas are also usually good on general healthcare. So if the government is not corrupt, usually there is an interest in creating a pretty good general medical care. And the graph below shows the greener the country, the less corrupt it's perceived and the more connected it is. So these green areas are prevalent to lead the world on global healthcare. This is the chart for Europe. As you see here, again, the darker green the country, the less corrupt and the more connected to the internet. And in this chart, you see all the countries in the world plotted. So in the highlighted section, you see the countries that are free from corruption and that have a high connectivity, and those are predestined to lead future global governance on healthcare prevention and for security and protection. Austria stands here. It perceives itself as pretty free from corruption, and you do see that it is quite well connected. So best conditions in Austria to lead on AI for a general healthcare solution in pandemic alleviation and prevention. How will society change? The coronavirus survivors, as we see in the charts below, corona is extraordinarily hard and more likely to be fatal the older you get, and the more pre-existing conditions you have. So we can infer from that evolutionary dominant young are more likely to survive the coronavirus, and for them there might be job opportunities and fiscal space becoming available. And as you see in the graph below, I did back in 2011 a study with 110 experts that shared information on justice responsibility for the future, and the number one issue for society in mind was the lurking pension for reform needs of an aging Western world population. And corona, with the prevalence and preconditions being more hard on these groups, you can say that fiscal space might become available for the survivors who are likely to be younger and not costly for the general healthcare system. The survivors might also be more self-determined and exhibit more eccentric consumption. We have this in terror management theory and other psychological crowd control theories that in the face of death and suffering, people become more eccentrically lavish in their consumption. So people might have a zest for luxury. I'm currently also hosting a project on how luxury transforms into societal progress and economic growth. And what I found in studies at the Metropolitan Museum of Arts is that for luxury to transpose to economic growth and societal progress, you need a gestalt that's larger than its component. As you see here, this beautiful ensemble of a silver table, a mirror, and candle holders. This comes from a royal court, and it has never been destroyed, made into money by just melting the vast amount of silver that it contains, because the gestalt, the ensemble, was larger, greater, more beautiful than the melted pieces. Also, you need a common good fostering a social identity, and this can be enabled in collective experiences. Also from the Metropolitan Museum of Arts, here two drums, and they were used in ancient time when there was no internet communication. They were used to make large announcements like a wedding or to go to war. And these collective experiences were considered as something greater than to be destroyed. So also these drums survived many centuries and were never melted because they gave a meaning to the crowd. And then lastly, groundbreaking innovations are a luxury that can offset progress and societal development. Here you see the Turk that comes from Maria Theresia's court. There was cheating going on with the Turk, but to this day it's one of the most cited innovations ever because it demonstrated back then mastery over the world, mechanization. It was this dream of having computers, and to this day the Turk stands for luxury driving progress. How are we going to enable luxury in the digital age? Anti-discrimination of excellence, celebrate excellence in luxurious innovations, groundbreaking innovations that can change and imbue progress in society. Common goods information sharing, one more time, information shared online that's free is non-rivalrous. I take nothing away from someone who can read the same Wikipedia entry as another person, and there are network effects. So information is the only good that has a marginally increasing value. So the more I consume, the more complex interactions I see, the more complex conclusions I can draw from, and no other good, the standard good has this feature. Usually goods have a marginally declining utility. No one can eat 20 eggs at once, drive 3 cars at once, and consume. But information is different in that sense. And create and really have research on how to create emotional gratification in large-scale digital events like we are creating today with this amazing panel. So the last piece that I want to leave you with is the Renaissance that sparked from via the Great Plague, via luxury consumption in the eye of the survivors. The Renaissance was also a time where people focused back on ancient values, and we might, in this digitalization that's currently ongoing, also look back and reflect values in these new virtual spaces that we are creating. We have to look into responsible luxury consumption online, and one of the predicaments that opens up there is the constant decision making between information sharing versus privacy, utility versus dignity, utility in sharing information, and dignity in upholding my privacy protection. Ethics also open up when we think that most of the data gains that are reaped currently online are completely untaxed. Here the list of top 6 S&P 500 companies that are by now all data mining companies that are still to this day untaxed. And their monopoly position is still unregulated and not broke for the sake of network effects. So for the reaping of big information and having creating network effects, these monopolies are not lowered. And lastly, have a consumption of information online really sustainable? Who's going to be the master? Who's going to be the slave in the interaction between digitalization and human interaction? We have to sort out. I go back to ancient Greek, Athenian city-state values, but also slavery in the Roman law and the Code Napoleon to see the interaction of algorithms and human beings, how we can potentially regulate and find a just, fair, and ethical solution, how to integrate new technologies in our daily lives in order to make them most compatible to flourish in the new age digital renaissance.